The dust cloud rose from the cattle yard like a prayer, and through it, Ellie Morgan could see the massive silhouette of Caesar, the old Hereford bull who had been on the ranch longer than most of the hired hands, and she was whispering to him about her troubles when she heard the bootsteps behind her stop abruptly. "Well, I'll be damned," came the voice of James Hewitt. And Ellie turned to see the tall cowboy standing with his thumbs hooked in his belt loops, his hat pushed back on his head, revealing sun-bleached hair and eyes the color of sage in summer. "You've talked to that old bull longer than to me this week, and I'm a bit jealous." Ellie felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun beating down on the Red Creek Ranch. It was July 1884, and she had been avoiding James Hewitt for exactly 6 days, ever since she had caught herself staring at the way his shoulders filled out his work shirt while he was breaking in a new horse. The realization that she had developed feelings for her father's most trusted ranch hand had terrified her enough to send her scurrying away whenever he came near. "Caesar is a good listener," Ellie said, forcing herself to meet James's gaze. "He doesn't argue or tell me what to do." "That's so." James walked closer, and Ellie became acutely aware that they were alone in this corner of the ranch, the cattle yard stretching out behind them, and the main house a good quarter-mile away. "What troubles are you burdening that old beast with?" Caesar, for his part, seemed entirely unconcerned with the conversation, continuing to chew methodically on the hay Ellie had brought him. The bull was 12 years old, ancient by most standards, but her father, Walter Morgan, refused to send him off. Caesar had been the foundation of their breeding program, and Walter was a man who rewarded loyalty. "Nothing that concerns you," Ellie said, but there was no bite in her words. She had known James for 3 years now, ever since he had drifted into Red Creek looking for work, and her father had taken a chance on the then 22-year-old ranch hand who carried himself with the bearing of someone who had seen more of life than his years suggested. James was 25 now, and Ellie had turned 21 last month. The small birthday celebration her father had thrown seemed like a lifetime ago, though James had given her a set of leather gloves he had tooled himself with her initials worked into the cuffs in an intricate pattern that must have taken him hours. She wore them every day. "Maybe it should concern me," James said quietly, and something in his tone made Ellie's breath catch. "Seeing as how the thing that's got you hiding out here talking to livestock might have something to do with me." "Your ego is showing, Hewitt," Ellie managed, but her voice wavered. "Am I wrong?" He was close enough now that she could smell the combination of leather and sage and sun-warmed skin that she had come to associate with him. "Because I've been racking my brain trying to figure out what I did to make you avoid me like I've got the plague." Ellie turned back to Caesar, running her hand along the bull's broad forehead. The animal's breathing was steady and calm, and she wished she could borrow some of that serenity. "You didn't do anything wrong. Then why won't you look at me?" The hurt in James's voice was unmistakable, and it cut through Ellie's defenses like a hot knife through butter. She forced herself to turn and meet his eyes, "Because looking at you makes me feel things I'm not supposed to feel." The words hung in the air between them, as tangible as the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. James's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something that made Ellie's heart hammer against her ribs. "Ellie," he said, and her name had never sounded like that before, like something precious. "What kind of things?" "The kind that would make my father fire you," she whispered. "The kind that keep me awake at night, the kind that make me want to do something reckless." James took another step closer. "Your father is a reasonable man." "He's a protective father," Ellie corrected, "and you're his employee. There are lines that shouldn't be crossed." "What if I don't care about lines?" James reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to step back, and tucked a strand of dark hair that had escaped her braid behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "What if I've been going crazy this past week trying to figure out what I did wrong, when the whole time you were just feeling the same things I've been feeling for months?" "Months?" Ellie's voice came out as barely more than a breath. "Since winter, at least," James admitted. "Maybe longer. You remember that day you came out to help with the calving? That heifer was struggling and you stayed up all night with me making sure she and her calf made it through? Ellie remembered. It had been February, cold enough that they could see their breath, and they had taken turns checking on the laboring cow every hour. Somewhere around 3 a.m, sitting in the barn with a lantern between them and their shoulders pressed together for warmth, James had told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about the years he had spent drifting from ranch to ranch looking for a place that felt like home. I remember, she said. That was when I knew, James said simply. That was when I realized I was in trouble because I had gone and fallen for the boss's daughter. James. Ellie didn't know if she was protesting or pleading. I know it's complicated, he continued. I know I'm just a ranch hand without much to my name except a good horse and a few months' wages saved up. I know your father probably has bigger plans for you than someone like me. But Ellie, if there's even a chance that you feel the same way, I need to know. Because watching you avoid me this week has been torture. And if I've misread this whole situation, I'll find a way to live with it, but I can't go on wondering. Ellie made her decision in the span of a heartbeat. She closed the distance between them and kissed him, her hands coming up to grip the front of his shirt. James made a sound of surprise that quickly turned into something else entirely as his arms came around her, pulling her close. The kiss was everything Ellie had imagined during those sleepless nights and nothing like it at the same time. James kissed her like she was precious, like she was brave, like she was the answer to a question he had been asking for years. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. That's a pretty clear answer, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. My father is going to have your hide, Ellie said, but she was smiling too. Worth it, James said firmly. He pulled back enough to look at her properly. Though we should probably tell him sooner rather than later. I'm not going to sneak around behind Walter Morgan's back. He's been too good to me for that. You want to tell him today? Ellie felt panic flutter in her chest. I want to do this right, James said. I want to court you properly with your father's blessing. I want to take you to the dance in town next month. I want everyone to know that I'm the luckiest man in Arizona territory. You're serious about this, Ellie said wonderingly. As serious as a man can be, James confirmed. I'm not playing around here, Ellie. I'm talking about a future. I'm talking about saving up for land of our own someday, about building something together. I'm talking about marriage and family and growing old together. He paused. If that's what you want too. That's a lot to decide based on one kiss, Ellie said, but her heart was singing. It's not based on one kiss, James said. It's based on 3 years of getting to know you, of watching you handle everything this ranch throws at you with grace and strength. It's based on the way you care for every animal here, the way you talk to Caesar like he's an old friend. It's based on your kindness and your humor and the way you face life head on. The kiss just confirmed what I already knew. Ellie felt tears prick at her eyes. When did you get so good with words? I've had a lot of time to practice what I wanted to say, James admitted, though I figured I'd be the one to bring it up, not get caught eavesdropping on a conversation with a bull. Despite everything, Ellie laughed. Caesar is very wise. I was telling him about how confused I was, how I couldn't figure out if what I was feeling was real or just some passing fancy. And what did Caesar have to say about that? James asked, stroking his hand down her back in a way that made her shiver despite the heat. He just kept chewing, Ellie said. But somehow that was helpful. It made me realize that I was overthinking everything, that sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. Which is? That I'm in love with you, Ellie said, and watched James's face transform with joy. I fought it for a while, told myself all the reasons it was a bad idea, but the heart wants what it wants. Say that again, James said roughly. I love you, James Hewitt, Ellie said louder this time. I love your integrity and your work ethic and the way you gentle the horses. I love the way you respect my father and treat the other ranch hands fairly. I love the way you look at sunset when you don't think anyone is watching, like you're grateful for another day. I love your hands and your laugh and the way you say my name. James kissed her again deeper this time, and Ellie melted into him. When they finally broke apart, both were flushed and breathing hard. "We should go talk to your father," James said reluctantly, "before I lose my nerve or you come to your senses." "I'm not going to come to my senses," Ellie said firmly. "This is the most sensible thing I've ever done." They walked back to the main house hand in hand, Caesar watching their departure with what Ellie could have sworn was approval in his liquid brown eyes. The ranch house was a sprawling adobe structure that Walter Morgan had built when he first claimed this land 15 years ago. He had come west after the Civil War, looking to start fresh, and had built Red Creek Ranch into one of the most successful operations in the Arizona Territory. Walter was in his study when they found him, poring over the account books. He looked up when they knocked, his weathered face creasing into a smile at the sight of his daughter that faded into confusion when he saw their joined hands. "Ellie? James? What's this about?" Walter set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, his sharp blue eyes missing nothing. "Sir," James said, and Ellie could feel the slight tremor in his hand. "I need to speak with you about something important." "I gathered that much," Walter said dryly. "Sit down, both of you." They sat in the chairs across from his desk, and Ellie squeezed James's hand encouragingly. She knew her father could be stern, but she also knew he had a good heart beneath the gruff exterior. "Mr. Morgan," James began, then cleared his throat. "Walter, I want to ask your permission to court your daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Walter looked from James to Ellie and back again, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed and rubbed a hand over his face. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "As of about 30 minutes ago," James said honestly, "though I'll admit my feelings go back further than that. But I want to be clear, sir, nothing inappropriate has happened under your roof or on your time. I have too much respect for you and for Ellie for that." "Daddy," Ellie said, finding her voice, "I know this might come as a surprise, but James and I care for each other. He's a good man. You know he is. You've trusted him with your ranch and your cattle for 3 years now." "Trusting a man with my cattle is different from trusting him with my daughter," Walter said, but there was something in his tone that gave Ellie hope. "I know that, sir," James said, "and I don't take it lightly. I'm not a rich man, and I don't have much to offer except hard work and a willingness to do whatever it takes to make Ellie happy. But I love her, and I want to build a life with her. I'm asking for the chance to prove myself worthy of her." Walter was quiet for a long moment, studying James with an intensity that would have made a lesser man squirm. Finally, he turned to Ellie. "Is this what you want, daughter?" he asked gently. "I need to hear it from you." "It is," Ellie said without hesitation. "I love him, Daddy. I know it might seem sudden, but it doesn't feel sudden to me. It feels like something that's been building for a long time. And I just finally let myself admit it." Walter sighed again, but when he spoke, his voice was gruff with emotion. "I suppose I'm not entirely surprised. I'd have to be blind not to notice the way you two have been dancing around each other, and Martha commented on it more than once before she passed." Ellie felt her throat tighten at the mention of her mother, who had died 2 years ago from pneumonia. Martha Morgan had been the heart of Red Creek Ranch, and her absence was still keenly felt. "Your mother liked James," Walter continued, speaking to Ellie. "She told me once that he reminded her of me when I was young, said he had the same determination, the same fundamental decency." He turned back to James. "She would have approved of this, I think." "I hope so, sir," James said quietly. "I only met her briefly, but she was kind to me from the first day I arrived." Walter stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the ranch. "You understand what you're taking on, James? Ellie's not just any ranch owner's daughter. She's my partner in running this place. She knows every aspect of this operation as well as I do. If you marry her, you're not just getting a wife. You're getting a woman who has her own opinions and her own strength." "I wouldn't want her any other way, Jingy Chur," James said firmly. Walter turned back to face them, and Ellie saw the hint of a smile on his weathered face. "All right, then. You have my permission to court her. But James, I want you to know that if you hurt her, employee or not, friend or not, I will make you regret it." "Understood, sir," James said, standing to shake Walter's extended hand. "I promise you, I will spend every day trying to deserve her." "See that you do," Walter said. Then, surprisingly, he pulled James into a brief, back-slapping embrace. "Welcome to the family, son. Officially, this time." Ellie felt tears spill over as she hugged her father. "Thank you, Daddy." "Your mother would have my hide if I stood in the way of your happiness," Walter said gruffly. "Besides, I've gotten used to having James around. Be ashamed to lose a good ranch hand just because I was too stubborn to see what was right in front of me." The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. True to his word, James courted Ellie properly. He took her on rides through the desert at sunset, showing her places on the ranch she had never explored. They talked for hours, sharing their dreams and fears and everything in between. James told her about his childhood in Texas, about the small ranch his parents had run before the fever took them, about the years he had spent feeling adrift before he found Red Creek. Ellie shared her own memories of growing up on the ranch, of learning to ride before she could properly walk, of the loneliness she had sometimes felt being the only child, of watching her mother's illness progress with a helplessness that still haunted her. She told James about her dreams of expanding the ranch, of implementing new breeding techniques she had read about, of making Red Creek Ranch a legacy that would last for generations. "We could do that together," James said one evening as they sat on the ridge overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, and Ellie was tucked against James's side, his arm around her shoulders. "You'd want that?" Ellie asked. "To build this place up, to put down roots here permanently?" "I've been putting down roots here since the day I arrived," James said. "I just didn't realize how deep they went until I fell in love with you. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Ellie tilted her face up to kiss him, marveling at how natural it had become, how right it felt to be in his arms. They had been careful to maintain propriety, especially around her father and the ranch hands, but in these stolen moments alone, they allowed themselves the freedom to express their feelings. "The dance is next week," James said when they finally broke apart. "I can't wait to show you off to the whole town." The dance was the social event of the summer in Red Creek, a small town about 5 miles from the ranch. The whole community would turn out for it, and Ellie knew that appearing there with James would be a declaration of their relationship to everyone who mattered. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Ellie teased. "Mrs. Henderson is going to interrogate you thoroughly, and the Davies sisters have been trying to marry off their niece to every eligible man in the territory. They're going to be heartbroken." "I can handle Mrs. Henderson," James said with a grin. "And the Davies sisters will just have to find someone else for their niece. I'm thoroughly spoken for." The night of the dance arrived with temperatures that had finally dropped from scorching to merely warm. Ellie wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and spent extra time on her hair, arranging it in a style her mother had taught her. When she came downstairs, both her father and James were waiting, and the look on James's face made all the effort worthwhile. "You look beautiful," James said, seemingly unable to take his eyes off her. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Ellie said, taking in his pressed shirt and string tie. He had clearly made an effort, and it showed. The ride into town was pleasant, the three of them taking the wagon since Walter had decided to come along as well. "Can't let you two have all the fun," he had said, but Ellie suspected he wanted to be there to run interference if anyone gave them trouble about their relationship. The dance was being held in the town hall, a wooden structure that served as church, school, and community center depending on the day of the week. By the time they arrived, the place was already packed with people, and a small band was tuning up in the corner. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over everything. As predicted, Mrs. Henderson descended on them almost immediately. The elderly woman was the town's self-appointed guardian of morality and gossip, and nothing happened in Red Creek without her knowledge. "Ellie Morgan, is that you looking so pretty?" Mrs. Henderson said, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. "And James Hewitt, my goodness, I almost didn't recognize you all dressed up. Are you two here together?" "Yes, ma'am," James said politely. "I'm courting Miss Morgan with her father's blessing." "Well, I'll be," Mrs. Henderson said, though her expression suggested she was not at all surprised. "I suppose it was only a matter of time. You two have been circling each other like cats for the better part of a year?" "We have not," Ellie protested, but she was laughing. "Have too," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "Everyone in town could see it except you two. Now, James Hewitt, you treat this girl right. Her mother was my dear friend, and I promised Martha I'd look out for her daughter." "I intend to, ma'am," James said seriously. "You have my word on that." Mrs. Henderson nodded, satisfied, and moved on to her next victim. Ellie shook her head in amusement. "I told you she'd interrogate you." "That wasn't so bad," James said, "though I get the feeling she could be a formidable enemy if she wanted to be." "You have no idea," Ellie said. The music started up and James offered her his hand. "May I have this dance?" "You may," Ellie said, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. Dancing with James was as natural as everything else about their relationship. He was a good dancer, moving with the same easy grace he showed when working with horses. They fit together perfectly, and Ellie was aware of the eyes on them, the whispers and smiles of their neighbors. By tomorrow, everyone in the territory would know that Ellie Morgan and James Hewitt were courting. "Enjoying being the center of attention?" James murmured in her ear. "Not particularly," Ellie admitted, "but I don't care what they think, as long as I'm with you." "Good answer," James said, and spun her in a way that made her laugh. They danced several more dances, then took a break to get some of the punch that someone had made. Walter was deep in conversation with some of the other ranchers, discussing cattle prices and the perpetual concerns about water rights and drought. James was quickly pulled into the conversation, and Ellie listened with interest as he held his own, offering insights that showed his deep understanding of the ranching business. Sarah Chen, one of Ellie's friends from town, pulled her aside during a lull. "You and James look happy," Sarah said with a smile. She ran the general store with her husband, and Ellie had known her for years. "We are," Ellie said, unable to keep the joy out of her voice. "I'm glad," Sarah said sincerely. "You deserve happiness, Ellie. After everything with your mother, after all the work you put into that ranch, you deserve someone who sees you for who you are." "James does," Ellie said softly. "He sees all of me, even the parts I try to hide, and he loves me anyway." "That's how you know it's real," Sarah said wisely. "When someone loves you, not despite your flaws, but including them." She paused. "My grandmother used to say that love isn't finding someone perfect. It's finding someone whose imperfections fit with yours like puzzle pieces." "Your grandmother was a smart woman," Ellie said. "She was," Sarah agreed. "And she'd like James, I think. He has good energy, as she would say." The evening continued in a pleasant blur of dancing, conversation, and laughter. Ellie couldn't remember the last time she had felt so light, so free from the weight of responsibility that usually pressed on her shoulders. With James at her side and her father smiling from across the room, she felt like her world had finally clicked into place. As the night wound down and they prepared to head back to the ranch, James pulled her outside for a moment of privacy. The night air was cool against her flushed skin, and the stars overhead were brilliant in the desert sky. "Thank you for tonight," James said, taking both her hands in his, "for letting everyone know about us, for not being ashamed to be seen with a ranch hand." "James, no," Ellie said firmly. "Don't talk about yourself like that. You're not just a ranch hand. You're the man I love, and I'm proud to be with you." "I know," James said. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that's all. That someone like you would choose someone like me. Someone like me chose someone like you because you're kind and strong and honest," Ellie said. "Because you work hard and dream big and make me laugh. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I can be completely myself. That's worth more than all the money or status in the world." James kissed her then soft and sweet, and Ellie felt her heart expand with love for this man who had come into her life and changed everything. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, all three of them tired but content. Walter drove while Ellie dozed against James's shoulder, his arm around her, keeping her steady as the wagon jounced over the rough road. The summer passed into fall, and James and Ellie's relationship deepened. They worked side by side on the ranch, and Ellie discovered that having James as a partner made everything better. He listened to her ideas about improving the breeding program and offered suggestions of his own. Together, they implemented new techniques that showed promise of increasing their herd's overall health and quality. It was late October, with the air finally carrying a hint of coolness, when Ellie found James by the cattle yard again, this time talking to Caesar himself. "I thought I was the only one who talked to that old bull," Ellie said, making James jump. "You caught me," James said with a grin. "Though I have to say I understand the appeal. Caesar is a good listener." "What are you telling him?" Ellie asked, coming to stand beside James. Caesar, ever patient, continued his methodical chewing. "I was asking his advice, actually," James said, "about whether the timing was right for something I've been planning." "What kind of something?" Ellie asked, though her heart had begun to race. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Ellie's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring. It wasn't fancy, just a simple gold band with a small diamond, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "Ellie Morgan," James said, dropping to one knee right there in the dirt of the cattle yard. "I know we've only been courting officially for a few months, but I've known for much longer than that you're the one I want to spend my life with. You're my best friend, my partner, the person who makes every day better just by being in it. Will you marry me?" Ellie felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded. "Yes," she managed to say through her tears. "Yes, of course I'll marry you." James stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, Caesar let out a long, low bellow that sounded almost like approval. "Even Caesar agrees," James said, and Ellie laughed harder. They went to tell Walter immediately, finding him in the barn, checking on a mare who was due to foal soon. When he saw their faces, saw the ring on Ellie's finger, he smiled broadly. "About time," Walter said, pulling them both into a hug. "I was wondering how long you were going to make me wait before I could start planning a wedding." "You knew?" Ellie asked. "I'm old, not blind," Walter said. "I've seen the way that boy looks at you. I've been expecting this for weeks now." "I asked him for his blessing last month," James admitted. "I wanted to do this right." "You're a good man, James Hewitt," Walter said seriously, "and I'm proud to be gaining you as a son." The wedding was planned for December, after the fall work was done but before the winter weather made travel too difficult. Ellie threw herself into the preparations with the help of Sarah Chen and several other women from town. She kept things simple, knowing that elaborate affairs weren't practical in the Arizona territory, but she wanted the day to be special nonetheless. James, for his part, focused on building them a home. Walter had offered them a piece of land on the ranch, a beautiful spot near a creek with cottonwood trees for shade. With the help of the other ranch hands, James worked every spare moment constructing a small house for his future bride. It was modest, just 4 rooms, but he built it with care and love, thinking of Ellie with every nail he drove. Ellie wasn't supposed to see it until the wedding, but she snuck over one afternoon when she knew James was working on the far side of the ranch. The house was nearly complete, and she walked through it with wonder, seeing all the small touches James had included: a wide window in what would be their bedroom, positioned to catch the sunrise, a deep fireplace for cold winter nights, a kitchen with a good stove and plenty of counter space. In the bedroom, she found something that made her heart clench. On the wall, James had carved their initials inside a heart. It was simple and sweet, and she traced the letters with her fingers, imagining all the mornings she would wake up here with the man she loved. "I thought I told you not to peek," came James's voice from the doorway, and Ellie spun around guiltily. "I couldn't help myself," she admitted. "James, it's perfect. It's more than I could have hoped for." James crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "I want to give you everything," he said. "I know I can't give you luxury or fancy things, but I can give you a home built with love." "That's all I want," Ellie said. "You're all I want." They stood there in their future bedroom, holding each other as the afternoon light slanted through the window, and Ellie felt a peace settle over her. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for a December ceremony. The wedding was held at the ranch, with neighbors and friends coming from all over the territory to celebrate. Someone had decorated the barn with pine boughs and ribbons, transforming it into something magical. Ellie wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her frame. It was simple ivory lace, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw her mother looking back at her. The thought made her both sad and happy, knowing that Martha was with her in spirit on this important day. Walter walked her down the makeshift aisle, his arm steady under her hand. His eyes were bright with unshed tears as he handed her over to James, who looked more handsome than Ellie had ever seen him in his new suit. The ceremony was brief, conducted by the circuit preacher who passed through Red Creek once a month. But when James said his vows, his voice was strong and sure, and Ellie felt the words settle into her heart like a benediction. I, James Hewitt, take you, Ellie Morgan, to be my wife. I promise to love you in good times and bad, in sickness and health, through drought and plenty. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your companion in all things. I promise to honor you, respect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. When it was Ellie's turn, her voice shook only slightly as she spoke her own vows. I, Ellie Morgan, take you, James Hewitt, to be my husband. I promise to stand by your side through whatever life brings us. I promise to be your support, your comfort, your home. I promise to love you with everything I am for as long as we both shall live. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when James kissed her, the assembled crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Ellie felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The celebration that followed was joyous. There was food and music and dancing. Caesar had even been brought up from the cattle yard, decorated with ribbons, much to everyone's amusement. Walter made a toast that had everyone laughing and crying at the same time, welcoming James officially into the family and blessing their union. As the sun set and the party continued, James and Ellie slipped away to their new home. Someone had lit a fire in the fireplace, and lanterns glowed warmly throughout the rooms. Ellie stood in the center of the main room and turned slowly, taking it all in. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hewitt," James said, and the name sent a thrill through her. "I like the sound of that," Ellie said, going to him. "Mrs. Hewitt, your wife." "My wife," James repeated, as if testing out the words. "That's going to take some getting used to, in the best possible way." Their wedding night was everything Ellie had hoped for and more. James was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure she felt loved and cherished. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in their bed, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls, and talked quietly about their future. "I want to give you children," James said, his hand resting on her stomach. "If you want them too." "I do," Ellie said softly. "I want a house full of children, loud and chaotic and wonderful." "Boys or girls?" James asked. "Both," Ellie said, "or whatever God sees fit to bless us with. As long as they're healthy and loved, that's all that matters." "They'll be loved," James promised. "So loved, just like their mother." Life as a married woman suited Ellie perfectly. She and James fell into an easy rhythm, working the ranch during the day and coming home to their little house at night. They were partners in every sense of the word, and Ellie found that sharing her life with James made even the difficult days bearable. Winter passed into spring, and Ellie began to suspect she might be pregnant. When Doc Morrison confirmed her suspicions in April, she could hardly contain her excitement. She waited until that evening, when she and James were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, to tell him. "James, I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand. "What is it?" James asked, turning to look at her with concern. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Ellie said, smiling. "Everything's right, James. We're going to have a baby." The expression on James's face went through several rapid transformations: shock, disbelief, and then pure, radiant joy. "A baby? Are you sure?" "Doc Morrison confirmed it today," Ellie said. "I'm about 2 months along, he thinks. The baby should come in November." James let out a whoop of joy and picked Ellie up, spinning her around until she was laughing and begging him to put her down. When he finally did, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her tenderly. "We're going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "Ellie, I can't even process this. It's too good to be true." "It's true," Ellie said. "We're going to have a baby, our baby." They told Walter that same evening, and his joy matched their own. "A grandchild," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Martha, we're going to be grandparents." He said it like his late wife could hear him, and Ellie felt tears prick at her eyes. "I wish she could be here to see this," Ellie said softly. "She is," Walter said firmly. "She's watching over you, and she's happy. I know it." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Ellie found herself exhausted in the early months. James was protective to the point of being overprotective, trying to take over all her ranch duties and wrap her in cotton wool. Ellie had to firmly remind him that she was pregnant, not an invalid. "I can still work," she told him, after he tried to prevent her from riding out to check the herd. "Pregnant women have been working since the beginning of time. I'm not made of glass." "I know," James said apologetically. "I just worry. You're carrying our child. I want to make sure nothing happens to either of you." "Nothing is going to happen," Ellie said gently, "but I need you to trust me to know my own limits. I promise I'll be careful." They compromised, with Ellie cutting back on some of the more strenuous tasks, but still maintaining her active role in running the ranch. As her belly grew, she found herself drawn more and more to the cattle yard, sitting with Caesar and talking to the old bull about her hopes and fears for the coming baby. "You're going to be an uncle, in a way," Ellie told Caesar one warm summer afternoon. "I hope the baby loves animals the way I do. I hope they love this ranch and understand what it means to work the land." Caesar, as always, listened patiently, his calm presence soothing her nerves. James found her there one evening in late October when she was 8 months pregnant and so large she could barely see her feet. "There you are," he said, coming to sit beside her on the fence rail. "I should have known you'd be here." "Caesar and I were discussing names," Ellie said with a smile. "He's being very helpful." "Oh? What does Caesar suggest?" James asked, playing along. "He likes Jack for a boy," Ellie said, "and Rose for a girl." "Those are good names," James said, putting his arm around her carefully. "Though I have to ask, how exactly did Caesar communicate these preferences?" "He has his ways," Ellie said mysteriously. "What do you think? Jack or Rose?" "I think either would be perfect," James said, "though we should probably wait to see which one we need." "Fair point," Ellie conceded. She leaned against James, feeling the baby kick strongly. "Feel that? I think our son or daughter is excited about meeting you." James placed his hand on her belly, his face lighting up as he felt the movement. "Strong kicks. That's good." "Takes after their father," Ellie said fondly. As November approached, Ellie found herself growing more and more nervous. She had helped with countless animal births, but bringing a human child into the world was something entirely different. James was equally anxious, checking on her constantly and making sure everything was ready for the baby's arrival. Walter had brought down a cradle from the attic, the same one Ellie had slept in as a baby. James had cleaned it up and placed it beside their bed, and Ellie found herself staring at it sometimes, imagining a tiny person sleeping there. The baby came on a cold night in mid-November, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Ellie's labor started just after supper, and James immediately sent for Doc Morrison and the midwife, Mrs. Patterson, who lived in town. While they waited for help to arrive, James stayed by Ellie's side, holding her hand and doing his best to keep her calm despite his own obvious terror. "You're doing great," he kept saying, though his face was pale. "You're so strong, Ellie. You can do this." "Easy for you to say?" Ellie gasped between contractions. "You're not the one pushing a human being out of your body?" When Doc Morrison and Mrs. Patterson finally arrived, they took over with practiced efficiency. James was sent out of the room despite his protests, and Ellie could hear him pacing outside the door. The labor was long and difficult. For hours, Ellie fought to bring their child into the world, supported by Mrs. Patterson's firm voice and Doc Morrison's steady presence. Just when she thought she couldn't go on, when the pain seemed unbearable, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby's first cry. "It's a boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, placing the squalling infant on Ellie's chest, a healthy baby boy. Ellie looked down at her son through tears of exhaustion and joy. He was red-faced and screaming, his tiny fists waving in the air, and he was absolutely perfect. She counted his fingers and toes, marveling at the tiny nails, the wisps of dark hair on his head. "Can James come in?" she asked, and Mrs. Patterson nodded. The door opened immediately, and James practically flew across the room. When he saw his son, he stopped dead, his face transforming with wonder. "Ellie," he breathed, "he's perfect. He's absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Ellie asked. James nodded, unable to speak, and Mrs. Patterson showed him how to support the baby's head. The sight of James holding their son, looking down at him with such love and awe, made Ellie cry all over again. "Hello, Jack," James said softly. "I'm your papa. I'm going to love you forever, little man." "Jack," Ellie repeated. "Jack Hewitt. It's perfect." Walter came in shortly after, and Ellie watched her father become a grandfather, saw the tears streaming down his weathered face as he held his grandson for the first time. "He looks like you did," Walter told Ellie. "Same nose, same chin, but he has James's eyes, I think." "He has his own eyes," James said firmly. "He's his own person. We just get the privilege of helping him become who he's meant to be." The first few weeks with Jack were exhausting but wonderful. Ellie had never known it was possible to love someone so much it physically hurt. Every sound Jack made, every tiny movement filled her with overwhelming emotion. James was a devoted father, taking night feedings whenever he could and changing diapers without complaint. "I never want to forget this," Ellie said one night as they lay in bed with Jack sleeping in his cradle beside them. "The way he smells, the sound of his breathing, the weight of him in my arms. I want to remember every moment." "We'll have plenty more moments to remember," James said, pulling her close. "This is just the beginning." Jack grew quickly, hitting every milestone with the determination of someone who had places to be. By the time spring came around again, he was crawling, and James had to baby-proof their house to keep their adventurous son safe. One afternoon in May, when Jack was 6 months old, Ellie carried him out to the cattle yard to meet Caesar. The old bull was slower now, his age beginning to show, but he was still gentle and patient as Ellie brought Jack close. "Caesar, this is Jack," Ellie said. "Jack, this is Caesar. He's a very special friend of mine, and I hope he'll be your friend too." Jack reached out a chubby hand toward the bull, making happy babbling sounds. Caesar lowered his massive head and huffed softly, and Jack laughed. A sound so pure and joyful it made Ellie's heart sing. James came up behind them, wrapping his arms around both Ellie and Jack. "Teaching him early, I see." "I want him to know where he comes from," Ellie said. "This ranch, these animals, this land, it's his heritage." "He's lucky to have you as a mother," James said, kissing her temple. "We're both lucky." As Jack grew into a toddler and then a young child, Ellie and James's love only deepened. They weathered the challenges of parenthood together, supporting each other through sleepless nights and childhood illnesses. The ranch prospered under their joint management, and Red Creek Ranch became known throughout the territory for the quality of its cattle. When Jack was 3, Ellie discovered she was pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy seemed to fly by. Their daughter, Rose, was born on a beautiful spring morning in 1889, and she was as different from Jack as night from day. Where Jack had been loud and demanding, Rose was quiet and observant, watching the world with serious dark eyes. "Two perfect children," James said, holding Rose while Jack climbed onto the bed to meet his new sister. "How did I get so lucky?" "We got lucky," Ellie corrected. "Both of us." Jack was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Ellie found him in Rose's room one day, standing by her cradle and talking to her in his serious little boy voice. "You're going to love it here, Rose," Jack was saying. Papa is the best and Mama knows everything about everything. And there's horses and cows and this really old bull named Caesar who's super nice. I'll show you everything when you're big enough." Ellie's heart melted at the sight, and she knew that Martha was somewhere smiling down at them. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Jack and Rose grew up running wild on the ranch, learning to ride and rope and handle cattle. They were both natural ranchers, taking to the life the way Ellie had at their age. Jack had James's easygoing nature and Ellie's sharp mind, while Rose had her father's determination and her mother's way with animals. Caesar lived to the remarkable age of 18, finally passing peacefully one night in his sleep. The whole family mourned him, and James built a marker for the old bull in a spot overlooking the ranch. It was Jack, now 11 years old, who suggested they bury Caesar's bell beside him. "He was part of this family," Jack said seriously. "He should be remembered." "He will be," Ellie promised, tears streaming down her face as she remembered all the conversations she had had with the patient old bull over the years. "He'll always be remembered." Time moved on, as it always does. Walter lived to meet his great-grandchildren, Jack and Rose's own children, before passing peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76. Ellie grieved deeply for her father, but took comfort in knowing he had lived to see the legacy he had built flourish. James and Ellie grew older together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming calloused and weathered from years of ranch work, but their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, tempered and strengthened by everything they had faced together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, James took Ellie back to the spot where he had proposed, the cattle yard, where it had all begun. There was a new herd bull now, a grandson of Caesar's, but the place held the same memories. "I've been thinking about that day," James said, taking Ellie's hand, "when I told you I was jealous of Caesar because you talked to him more than to me." "Best case of jealousy I ever encountered," Ellie said with a smile. "Look where it led us." 30 years, James said wonderingly. "It feels like no time at all, and like forever all at once. You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, Ellie Hewitt. You still take my breath away." "Even with my gray hair and wrinkles?" Ellie teased. "Especially with your gray hair and wrinkles," James said seriously. "Every line on your face tells a story of our life together. Every gray hair is a memory. I wouldn't change a single thing." "Neither would I," Ellie said. "You've been everything I ever wanted, James. Everything I ever dreamed of and more." They stood there in the fading light. Two people who had built a life together from nothing but love and hard work. Around them, the ranch hummed with life, their children working alongside the hands, their grandchildren playing near the house, the cattle lowing in the distance. "Do you remember what I told you that day?" James asked. "About wanting to build something together, about wanting a future?" "I remember everything you said," Ellie said. "We did it," James said simply. "We built something that will last. Red Creek Ranch is going to be here for generations because of what we created together." "It's not the ranch that matters most," Ellie said. "It's the family we built. That's the real legacy. Jack and Rose, our grandchildren, and all the ones yet to come. That's what we created, James. A family founded on love." James pulled her close, and they stood there watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, just like they had on so many evenings over the past 30 years. Caesar's grandson bellowed from the pasture, the sound carrying across the land like a benediction. "I love you, Ellie Hewitt Farns," James said. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." "I love you too, James Hewitt," Ellie said, "for all the days of our lives." And as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Ellie thought about that day so long ago when she had been talking to an old bull about her troubles, never imagining that the cowboy who found her there would become the center of her entire world. Life had a funny way of working out, she reflected. Sometimes the best things came from the most unexpected moments. The ranch continued to thrive as the years went on, passing from generation to generation just as James and Ellie had hoped. Their children honored the legacy they had built, teaching their own children the values of hard work, integrity, and love that had been instilled in them. Jack grew up to be a fine rancher, marrying a woman from town who took to ranch life with enthusiasm. They had 4 children of their own, and Jack often told them stories about their grandmother talking to Caesar the bull, about how their grandfather had been jealous of an old bull and how that jealousy had led to the greatest love story Jack had ever witnessed. Rose became equally successful, though she took a different path. She studied veterinary medicine, becoming one of the first female veterinarians in Arizona Territory and later Arizona State. But she never forgot her roots, returning to Red Creek Ranch often to help with the herd and to visit her parents. She married a fellow veterinarian, and together they had 3 children who spent every summer on the ranch, learning the ropes from their grandparents. As James and Ellie entered their 60s, they began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, trusting Jack and his family to take over the main management. But they were always present, always available to offer advice or lend a hand when needed. Ellie found herself with more time for the things she had always loved but had been too busy for during the demanding middle years. She started a garden that became legendary in the county, grew flowers that her mother had loved, and spent long afternoons reading on the porch of the house James had built for her all those years ago. James, meanwhile, focused on training horses. It was something he had always been good at, but now he had the time to really perfect his craft. People came from all over the territory to buy horses trained by James Hewitt, knowing they were getting an animal that was not just broke but truly educated. They made time for each other, too. Once a month, they would pack a picnic and ride out to a special spot on the ranch, spending the day together just talking, remembering, and enjoying each other's company. These days became precious to both of them, a reminder that even after all these years, they were still each other's best friend. One evening in their 65th year, as they sat on the porch watching yet another Arizona sunset, James reached over and took Ellie's hand. "I've been thinking," he said. "That's usually trouble," Ellie teased, but she squeezed his hand affectionately. "I want to renew our vows," James said. "I know it's not something people usually do, but I want to stand in front of our family and tell you all over again how much you mean to me. I want them to see what real love looks like." Ellie felt tears prick at her eyes. After all these years, James could still surprise her. "I think that's a wonderful idea." They planned a vow renewal ceremony for the following spring, timing it to coincide with their 45th wedding anniversary. The whole family came, children and grandchildren alike, as well as neighbors and friends from all over the territory. Some of the guests had been at the original wedding, now stooped and gray themselves, while others were young people who had never known a world where James and Ellie weren't the beloved patriarch and matriarch of Red Creek Ranch. The ceremony was held in the same spot as their wedding, the barn decorated with flowers from Ellie's garden. Jack stood up as his father's best man, while Rose served as her mother's matron of honor. The grandchildren served as attendants, serious in their roles but unable to suppress their excitement. When it came time for James to speak his vows, his voice was steady and strong, carrying across the assembled crowd. "Ellie, 45 years ago, I made promises to you. I promised to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. Today, I want to renew those promises and tell you that not only have I kept them, but they've gotten easier every single day. Loving you isn't work. It's the most natural thing in the world. You've been my partner, my friend, my confidant, and my greatest adventure. You've given me a life beyond my wildest dreams, children and grandchildren who fill my heart with joy, and a love that has sustained me through everything life has thrown our way. I promise to love you for whatever time we have left, to hold your hand as we face whatever comes, and to be grateful every single day that you chose me all those years ago." There wasn't a dry eye in the barn when he finished. Ellie's own vows were equally heartfelt, speaking of gratitude and love, and the beautiful life they had built together. After the ceremony, there was a celebration that lasted well into the night. Music played, children danced, and stories were told about James and Ellie's life together. The couple themselves sat in seats of honor, watching their family with joy and satisfaction. "We did good," James whispered to Ellie at one point, watching their youngest grandchild, a boy of 5, dancing with his older sister. "We did very good," Ellie agreed. "Better than I ever imagined possible." As the evening wore on and the party began to wind down, Jack stood up to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "2 people who showed me and my sister what real love looks like. Dad, you always told me that the measure of a man isn't in what he has, but in how he treats the people he loves. You've lived that principle every day of your life. Mom, you taught me that strength comes in many forms, and that being brave sometimes means being vulnerable enough to love with your whole heart. You two are the foundation of this family, and everything good in my life comes from the example you set. So here's to James and Ellie Hewitt. May they have many more years together, and may the rest of us be lucky enough to find even a fraction of what they have." The toast was met with cheers and applause, and James pulled Ellie close, kissing her temple. "Our boy has grown up well," he murmured. "Both our children have," Ellie said. "We're very blessed." The years continued to pass, bringing their share of joys and sorrows. Ellie's joints began to ache with arthritis, especially in the cold months, and James developed a heart condition that required him to slow down. But they faced these challenges together just as they had faced everything else in their long marriage. They were blessed with great-grandchildren, tiny babies who would grow up hearing stories about their great-grandparents, about the love story that had started with a jealous cowboy and a patient bull. James and Ellie delighted in these new additions to the family, marveling at how their love had multiplied and spread across generations. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw them a massive celebration. People came from all over Arizona to honor the couple who had become something of a legend in the region. The governor even sent a proclamation recognizing their contributions to Arizona's ranching industry. But the moment that meant the most to Ellie came when her youngest grandchild, now 10 years old, pulled her aside during the party. "Grandma," little Sarah said seriously, "I want to have a love story like yours and Grandpa's when I grow up. Can you tell me the secret?" Ellie knelt down, ignoring the protest from her arthritic knees, and took Sarah's hands. "The secret, my darling, is that there is no secret. Love isn't something that just happens and stays perfect forever. It's something you choose every single day. Your grandpa and I have had wonderful times and difficult times. We've laughed together and cried together. We've disagreed and we've celebrated, but through it all, we chose each other. Every morning we woke up and chose to love each other, to support each other, to be partners. That's the secret. Love is a choice, and you make it every day." "I think I understand," Sarah said thoughtfully. "Like how Papa says you have to take care of your horse every day, not just when you feel like it." Ellie laughed. "Exactly like that. Though I'd appreciate if you didn't compare your future husband to a horse when you find him." "Grandma," Sarah giggled, "you know what I mean." "I do, sweetheart. And yes, if you choose wisely and choose daily, you can have a love story like ours. In fact, I hope you have something even better. I hope every generation builds on what came before." As Sarah ran off to rejoin the other children, James came up beside Ellie. "What was that about?" "Just passing on wisdom to the next generation," Ellie said, standing with a slight groan. "Goodness, when did I get so old?" "You're not old, you're seasoned," James said, offering her his arm, "like a good cast-iron skillet." "Did you just compare me to cookware?" Ellie asked, but she was laughing. "Only the best cookware," James said with a grin. "The kind that gets better with age and makes everything better." "Smooth recovery," Ellie said, taking his arm. "You've gotten good at talking your way out of trouble over the years." 50 years of practice," James said. "Though to be fair, you've always been easy to apologize to. You never held grudges." "Life's too short for grudges," Ellie said. "I learned that from my mother. She always said that anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. Better to forgive, move on, and focus on the good." They walked slowly through the party, greeting guests and accepting congratulations. Everywhere Ellie looked, she saw the fruits of their labor, children and grandchildren who were happy and healthy, a ranch that was thriving, a community that respected them. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for that day so long ago when she had been pouring her heart out to an old bull. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and crimson, James led Ellie away from the party to a quiet spot overlooking the ranch. From here, they could see everything they had built together: the house where they had raised their children, the barns and corrals, the pastures full of cattle, the trees they had planted that were now tall and providing shade. 50 years, James said softly. Half a century. It feels like yesterday and forever ago all at once. I know what you mean, Ellie said, leaning against him. Sometimes I can close my eyes and see you as you were that day in the cattle yard, young and nervous and so earnest when you told me you were jealous of Caesar. I was terrified, James admitted. Terrified that you'd laugh at me, or worse, that you'd confirm that I had imagined the whole thing and you didn't feel the same way. I was just as terrified, Ellie said. I had convinced myself that you could never be interested in someone like me, that I was just the boss's daughter and you were being nice to me because you had to be. I was never nice to you because I had to be, James said firmly. I was nice to you because you made it easy, because you were kind and smart and beautiful, and being around you made every day better. Still does? Ellie asked teasingly. Still does, James confirmed. Every single day, even the hard days, even when we're arguing about something stupid, even when my back hurts and your knees ache and we're both feeling our age, being with you is still the best part of every day. Ellie turned to kiss him, a soft, sweet kiss that held 50 years of love and commitment. When they broke apart, she rested her head on his shoulder. I wonder what Caesar would think if he could see us now, she mused. That old bull was there at the beginning of everything. I think he'd be proud, James said, though he'd probably also think we're making too much fuss about the whole thing. Bulls are practical creatures. He was a good listener, Ellie said. I miss him sometimes. Is that silly? Not at all, James said. He was part of our story. It's natural to miss the characters who played important roles. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower. From the party behind them, they could hear laughter and music, the sounds of their family celebrating together. Do you have any regrets? Ellie asked suddenly. Anything you wish you'd done differently? James was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. No, he finally said. I mean, sure, there are small things. Times I wish I'd been more patient or less stubborn or handled something better. But the big things, the important choices, no regrets at all. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Everything good in my life came from that. Same, Ellie said softly. I've been so lucky, James. Lucky to find you, lucky to love you, lucky to build this life with you. We make our own luck, James said, by showing up every day and doing the work and choosing each other. That's not luck, Ellie. That's love. As the last rays of sunlight faded and the stars began to appear, Jack came to find them. Mom, Dad, we're about to cut the cake. You should come back. We'll be right there, Ellie said. Jack started to leave, then turned back. You know, I hope when Sarah and I are your age, we can look back on our lives with the same happiness I see in both of you. You set the bar pretty high. You'll clear it easily, James said. You and Melissa are already well on your way. Just remember what matters most and never let it slip away. After Jack left, James and Ellie stood for another moment, reluctant to break the peaceful spell of the evening. Ready to go back to the party? James asked. Almost, Ellie said. I just want one more minute here, just the two of us looking at everything we've built. Take all the time you need, James said. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Ellie asked, even though she knew the answer. Promise, James said firmly. I'm going to be right here beside you for as long as I possibly can, and even after that, my love for you will continue. That's the thing about real love, Ellie. It doesn't end. It just transforms and continues in new ways. Finally, they turned and walked back to the party hand in hand, ready to cut their anniversary cake and celebrate with the family they had created. As they entered the barn, they were greeted with cheers and applause, and Ellie felt her heart swell with gratitude. The years after their 50th anniversary were gentler than the ones that came before. James and Ellie had fully retired from ranch work, leaving the operation in Jack's capable hands. They spent their days in quiet contentment, enjoying the simple pleasures of their life together. Mornings were spent on the porch with coffee, watching the ranch come to life. Afternoons might include a slow walk around the property or time spent with visiting grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Evenings were for sitting together as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence that comes with decades of companionship. James's heart condition worsened slowly over time, requiring medication and regular doctor visits. Ellie's arthritis made movement painful on bad days, but they took care of each other, just as they always had. James would help Ellie on mornings when her joints were particularly stiff, and Ellie made sure James took his medications on time and didn't overexert himself. On their 55th anniversary, they kept things simple, just family and a quiet dinner. James had been having a good week, feeling stronger than he had in months, and the day was perfect. After dinner, as they sat together on their porch in the chairs that had molded to their bodies over decades of use, James took Ellie's hand. "I need to tell you something," he said. "What is it?" Ellie asked, concerned by his serious tone. "I need you to know that loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life," James said. "Every day with you has been a gift. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a single thing." "James, you're scaring me," Ellie said. "Why does this sound like goodbye?" "It's not goodbye," James said quickly. "I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon. I just want to make sure you know, in case I don't get to say it later. I want you to know that you made me the man I became. You gave me purpose and love and a family. You gave me everything." "You gave me the same," Ellie said, tears streaming down her face. "You took a scared girl who was talking to a bull about her troubles and showed her what love really means. You've been my rock, my partner, my best friend. I can't imagine my life without you in it." "You won't have to for a long time," James said, pulling her close. "I'm stubborn. Remember? I'm planning on sticking around to meet our great-great-grandchildren." "Good," Ellie said fiercely, "because I'm not ready to let you go. Not now, not ever." They sat there as darkness fell, holding each other close, secure in the knowledge that whatever time they had left, they would face it together. James lived to see his 78th birthday, a celebration that brought the entire extended family back to the ranch. He was frailer than he had been, moving slowly and tiring easily, but his mind was sharp, and his love for his family undimmed. That fall, as the Arizona heat finally broke and cooler weather moved in, James caught a cold that turned into pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of doctors and the devoted care of his family, he grew weaker. Ellie rarely left his bedside, holding his hand and talking to him about their life together, reminding him of all the good times they had shared. On a quiet October morning, with Ellie beside him and his children and grandchildren nearby, James passed peacefully in his sleep. He was 78 years old, and he died knowing he was loved. Ellie's grief was profound, a physical ache that seemed to hollow her out from the inside. After 57 years of marriage, after building a life so intertwined with another person that she barely knew where she ended and he began, she felt utterly lost. But her family rallied around her, just as James would have wanted. Jack and Rose took turns staying with her, making sure she ate and slept. The grandchildren visited constantly, filling the house with life and noise, and slowly, very slowly, Ellie began to find her way forward. She took comfort in the legacy they had built together. Every time she looked at one of her children or grandchildren, she saw James looking back at her. His kindness lived on in Jack's patient teaching of his own children. His determination showed in Rose's successful veterinary practice. His love was evident in every corner of the ranch they had built together. Ellie lived another 5 years after James's death, years filled with family and memories and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. She told stories about James to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive for the youngest generation who would never get to know him personally. On what would have been their 62nd anniversary, Ellie had the family gather at the ranch. They walked together to the spot where James had proposed, where they had stood together so many times over the years. "I want you all to know," Ellie said, her voice strong despite her age, "that your grandfather and I had the kind of love that most people only dream about. It wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always perfect, but it was real. We chose each other every day, and that choice built this family. I want each of you to remember that love is a verb. It's something you do, not just something you feel. And if you can find someone who makes you want to choose them every single day, hold on to them. Build a life with them. Create something that will outlast you both." The family gathered around her, multiple generations united by the love story that had started everything. They shared memories of James and Ellie, laughing at the funny stories and crying at the touching ones. Ellie passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 months later at the age of 80. She was buried beside James on the hill overlooking the ranch, near the marker that commemorated Caesar the bull. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, testament to the impact she and James had made on their community. In the years that followed, Red Creek Ranch continued to thrive under the management of Jack and his children. The house that James had built remained in the family, passed down through generations, and every child born into the family grew up hearing the story of how it all began, of a cowboy who was jealous of a bull and the woman who loved them both. The legacy of James and Ellie Hewitt lived on in countless ways. In the strong marriages their children and grandchildren made, in the successful ranch that bore their stamp on every acre, in the values of hard work, integrity, and love that were passed down as surely as eye color or the shape of a nose. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun painted the desert in gold and crimson, family members swore they could feel the presence of their ancestors, still watching over the land they loved, still together in whatever comes after this life. The story of James and Ellie became something of a legend in Arizona, passed down not just within the family but throughout the community. It became the kind of story grandmothers told to granddaughters, the kind of example fathers used when teaching sons about how to treat a woman. A century after that day in the cattle yard when James first confessed his jealousy, a great-great-granddaughter stood in almost the exact same spot with her new husband, listening to her grandmother tell the famous story. And that, the grandmother concluded, is why we have a picture of a bull hanging in the main house. Caesar was there at the beginning of everything. He was the reason James finally worked up the courage to speak his heart. And your great-great-grandmother always said that sometimes the best advice comes from the most unexpected sources. The young bride laughed, then grew serious. "Do you think love like that still exists? That kind of once-in-a-lifetime, build-an-empire-together love?" "I know it does," the grandmother said firmly, "because you're looking at it. Every good marriage in this family is built on the foundation James and Ellie laid. They showed us what was possible when two people commit to each other completely. They proved that real love isn't about grand gestures or fairy tale romance. It's about showing up every day, doing the work, and choosing each other again and again. That kind of love never goes out of style." The young bride looked around the ranch, seeing the legacy that had sprung from one moment of honest emotion in a cattle yard long ago. She thought about the stories she had heard all her life, about James and Ellie's devotion to each other, about the way they had built something that lasted far beyond their own lives. "I want that," she said softly. "I want to build something that matters with someone I love." "Then you will," the grandmother said. "You come from a long line of people who knew how to love well. It's in your blood, in your bones. You just have to remember the lesson. Love is a choice you make every day. Choose wisely and choose consistently, and you can have something just as beautiful as what they had." As the sun set over Red Creek Ranch, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and crimson that had witnessed so many moments of James and Ellie's life together, the young couple walked hand in hand back toward the house. They passed the marker commemorating Caesar, the patient old bull who had played such an unexpected role in a love story that would span generations. And if the wind carried with it the echo of laughter and whispered words of love from long ago, if the desert seemed to hold memories of two young people discovering each other and building a life that would outlast them both, well, that was just the magic of Red Creek Ranch, where love had taken root and flourished for over a century. The story that began with a jealous cowboy and a wise old bull had become something more than just a personal history. It had become a testament to the power of love, the importance of commitment, and the beauty of building something that lasts. James and Ellie Hewitt had started with nothing but love and determination, and they had created a legacy that would endure for generations. Their love story lived on in every wedding celebrated at the ranch, in every child born into the family, in every sunset watched by couples who had heard the story and wanted something just like it for themselves. It lived on in the very soil of Red Creek Ranch, in the cattle that descended from Caesar's line, in the house that James had built with his own hands for the woman he loved, and somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life, James and Ellie were together still, watching over the family they had created, proud of what their love had built, grateful for every moment they had been given together. Their story had started with a simple confession of jealousy, but it had grown into something magnificent, a love that truly lasted forever. The end of their mortal story was just the beginning of their legacy, a legacy that would continue as long as there were people who believed in the power of love, who understood that the greatest things in life are built one day at a time, and who knew that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most extraordinary lives. James and Ellie Hewitt had lived and loved and left the world better than they found it. Their story was one of courage and commitment, of passion and partnership, of building something meaningful with someone you love. And in the end, that was the greatest success any life could claim.